Hello and welcome to FACT's webinar, Poultry with Purpose, the Humane Benefits of Slower Growing Breeds. Our guest presenters are two absolutely amazing women in the humane farming world, and that is Dr. Sara Shields and Dr. Hilary Dalton. I'm Samantha Gasson, FACT's Humane Farming Program Director, and I will be moderating this session. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive right in, let me take a minute or two to do a few quick introductions. Food Animal Concerns Trust, or FACT, is a national nonprofit organization that works to ensure that all food-producing animals are raised in a humane and healthy manner. We accomplish this by supporting humane farmers through our humane farming program, promoting policies that make foods from animals safe and healthy to eat through our Safe and Healthy Foods program, and generally help consumers make informed food choices. You can visit our website at foodanimalconcerns.trust.org to learn more about all of our farmer services. And I would like to thank my wonderful colleague, Catherine Hoke, who is joining us and will help field questions and take over if my internet decides to crap out, which it has been doing a lot lately. So I apologize ahead of time. So at this time, I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed presenters, Hilary Dalton and Sara Shields. So Dr. Sara Shields earned her BS in zoology from Colorado State University and her PhD from the University of California, Davis in animal behavior. She taught animal welfare classes and did postdoctoral research at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. She is currently the Director of Farm Animal Welfare Science at Humane World for Animals and has been working with the organization for the past 19 years. Currently, she serves as a board member of the Global Animal Partnership, also known as GAP, and I'm also on that board, a farm animal standard setting and certification program. She specializes in the welfare of farm animals and provides scientific and technical information to governments, food retailers, universities, producers, and standard setting bodies and advocacy organizations. Next, we have Dr. Hilary. I was just about ready to call you Hillary Clinton. Sorry, Hilary. Dr. Hilary Dalton is the Senior Research Manager at Compassion for World Farming USA, where she leverages her extensive technical expertise and industry experience to advise companies, producers, and policymakers on improving farmed animal welfare and adopting regenerative farming practices. She is also currently serving on the board of directors for the Global Animal Partnership with Sara and myself, and she chairs the Standards Committee for the Animal Welfare Pillar of the Regenerative Organic Certification. Dr. Dalton holds a PhD in poultry behavior and welfare from the University of Guelph. Hilary, help me.
Guelph, you're right.
Well,
First is right. Yeah.
all right. With an MS in Applied Animal Behavior and Welfare from the University of Edinburgh and a BS in Animal Biology from the University of Alberta. She previously held a postdoctoral position at Newcastle University, leading precision agricultural research focused on pigs and poultry. So we are incredibly lucky to have the extensive experience from both of these amazing women with us today. So without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to you guys, so that you may begin your presentation. Ladies, it's all yours.
Thank you, Samantha. That was a really nice introduction. It's great to be here with all of you. It's really nice to have the invitation to talk directly to all of you who are working with the chickens. Sometimes we do a lot of work with the retailers and don't get to talk to the farmers, so this is fun. All right, so Dr. Dalton is going to run the slides for me. She's going to try to read my mind when I need to advance. So if we could have the next slide. Here's our agenda. This is what the two of us are going to talk to you about today. We're going to start with kind of a fun and very brief history of the global chicken industry, starting in the United States. And then I'm going to go into the welfare problems of conventional broiler chicken genetics. And this is all I've tried to take the research and distill it down into easy to understand information about why this is such a big issue. And then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Dalton, and she'll discuss what a slower growing breed is and why they are so good for pasture production systems. And then she'll pass it back over to me, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Better Chicken Commitment and more about the Global Animal Partnership Program. So with that, yeah, let's start with the brief history of the commercial broiler chicken production. You probably know, and it's a good place to start, that prior to the 1920s, most households had backyard chickens. And these were dual purpose breeds, so they were kept for both meat and egg production. And chicken was a rarity. It wasn't eaten every day or as commonly as it is today. It was sort of like a special Sunday night dinner. But in 1916, a man named Robert Cobb started farming and breeding chickens in Littleton, Massachusetts. And Robert Cobb was a student at Harvard University, but he ended up going into chicken farming. And I don't know how much hubris this man had, but he probably had no idea the impact that his little breeding company would have on the global production of chickens. And I think we have a photo next. Yeah, I found this photo and I thought it was really neat. So here is Robert Cobb and his wife loading up their baby chicks from Cobb's pedigree chickens for delivery to the farms. So this is how it all started. In the 1920s, vitamin D was discovered. It was discovered that you could supplement vitamin D in the diets of animals. And prior to this, it was impossible to keep chickens indoors because they needed sunlight in order to synthesize vitamin D. But once they started adding vitamin D to the diets, global or internal inside production inside the house really started to take off. So by the 1940s through the 1960s, we started to see vertical integration. So that was when, instead of separate entities owning the hatchery, the feed mill, and the processing plant, they started to buy all those steps of productions and vertically integrate. And that's when contract farming with producers started. By 1952, specialty meat chickens, or broiler chickens, surpassed farm chickens as the #1 source of US chicken meat. And in 1956, Ross started in Europe as an offshoot of Cobb in the United States. So in Edinburgh, England, we had a new breed of chicken that was just an offshoot of the Cobb genetics in the United States. By 1983, Arkansas Breeders was formed, which was the first venture between Tyson and Cobb. And by 1994, Tyson Foods acquired 100% of Cobb's share, thus making Cobb a wholly owned subsidiary of Tyson Foods. So Cobb is owned by Tyson Foods and has been expanding internationally ever since. So they started out in the US and went to Europe, then they moved into Africa, South America, Asia, and New Zealand. And this Cobb bird and the Ross are all over the world now. We could have the next slide. There are only 2 companies that supply genetics for the global chicken industry. That's the Ross lines, which are owned by Aviagen, and Cobb in the United States, which is owned by Tyson. Aviagen is the largest broiler breeding company in the world with 44% of global market share and operations in over 85 countries. I couldn't find the global market share of Cobb chickens, but I have a feeling that it rivals that of Avian's chickens because they're present in over 100 countries. I've seen them in Africa, in India, in Asia. And the Cobb 500 and the Ross 308 dominate the global chicken production. So if you're buying a Cornish Cross, so maybe you're getting your chicks from Stromsburg's or some other hatchery like that, those chicks are just Cobb and Ross genetics. And the Cobb 500 is a Tyson chicken. If you could, yeah. Most producers and consumers are surprised to learn that their pasture-based, organic, free-range bird is actually just a Tyson chicken. And anytime you do a presentation on the history of global chicken production, this is sort of the obligatory graph where you can see how broiler chicken production has increased since 1961 when the Food and Agriculture Organization started keeping statistics. We are now at over 75 billion chickens produced for slaughter worldwide, 75 billion with a B. In the United States, we produce 9.5 billion, and we are second in production only to China. We could have the next slide. So most of you probably already know that this is what conventional commercial broiler chicken production looks like. So the birds are reared in dimly lit sheds by the tens of thousands. They're very crowded. and the environment is barren. So what we mean by that is that there's no environmental enrichment. It's just the feed and water lines. They are on litter, but there's nothing for them to interact with in order to express their natural behavior. We could have the next slide. So I mentioned the environment. The environment is an issue, but the biggest issue with the welfare of broiler chickens is their genetics. So we're going to spend a little time on why this is such an issue. This slide, if you look down each column under each year, that is the same bird with her photo taken at 0 days of age, 28 days of age, and 56 days of age. So in 1957, it took 56 days for a broiler chicken to reach 2 pounds. By 1978, they weighed twice that much in the same amount of time. Now, if you let a chicken grow that long, they're upward of 9 pounds. And the industry likes to tout this as a fantastic example of a production efficiency gain. But what we're concerned about in the scientific community, in the animal welfare scientific community, is that these birds have difficulty walking. They're putting on so much weight on a skeletal system that's still maturing that they become very lame and have walking disorders. So it's not genetically modified organisms or hormones or anything like that, as most of you probably know. It is selectively breeding the fastest growing birds in each generation. We can have the next slide. The walking difficulties or walking disorders of broiler chickens are so common that there's actually a scoring system for them. So this is used by veterinarians, by animal scientists, by animal welfare researchers. And the way it works is they will go into a flock and they will watch a sample of birds walk, so maybe 100 birds. And they will score them based on how well they can walk. And the gait scoring system goes from 0 to 5. A gait score 0 bird has smooth, fluid, perfect locomotion, and a gait score 5 bird is completely incapable of walking. If you advance one, yeah, perfect. Usually when we're talking about this issue with corporations or with consumers, they want to know, okay, well, maybe I've been to a broiler chicken farm and I haven't seen any birds with a severe walking defect. And so if we look at the prevalence of these gait scores and how they show up in the flocks in the field, you start to get a sense of that. So this is data. I've taken the gait scoring system and overlaid data from a fairly recent study of 50 Ross 308 birds at about 30 days of age. And what this research shows is pretty typical. It's pretty common. Very few birds are in that perfect locomotion category. Most of them have a slight or a definite walking defect, so they're in gait score 1, 3. About 6%. And this is where we really start to worry about welfare. These birds have an obvious walking defect, and they may limp or be unsteady and will not run. So if we could have broiler chickens, you've probably seen walks like that. Walk, they want to. We could have the next slide. So at Gates, these birds have these are the citations for the scientific research showing that these birds are probably in pain. And the way that we know that they're in pain is because if you give a bird with gait score 3 or above a pain relieving anti-inflammatory drug like carprofen or meloxicam, they can walk better. So if you give them a pain relieving drug, their gait score improves. We could have the next slide. This is what a gait score 4 bird looks like. So these birds can walk only a few steps. And then they sit down again. And so if you are raising 100 birds, you might see 2 of these birds in your flock by the time they reach slaughter weight. That's about the prevalence. And then the gait score 5 birds, these birds can't walk at all. So you might see one of these birds in 1 of every 200 birds. We could have the next slide. Perfect. So this is the welfare issue that we're worried about. We're worried about these leg problems, which can become very severe and debilitating for the animals. And if you are a conventional farmer and you have tens of thousands of birds, it's one of your main daily tasks to walk through the flock and find the birds that look like this and cull them, because it would be inhumane to leave them any longer. They can't reach the feed and water. And even though not all of the animals will reach that state of degeneration, they're all in various stages of degradation to that point. So they will all reach that point eventually if they're not slaughtered. And we think that this is an ethical issue to breed an animal that's prone to these kinds of walking disorders. Now, if we could have the next slide. It's not just the walking disorders. These conventional birds also suffer from muscle abnormalities like white striping, which is white striations in the breast muscles that you see here in the picture. Maybe you've seen this if you've processed these birds. They also tend to get woody breast syndrome, which is a hardening of the breast muscles. And a chicken with normal mobility can touch her wings behind her back, but a chicken with woody breast syndrome, severe woody breast syndrome, doesn't have the full rotation of their wings. And so sometimes these birds are found lying on their backs and they can't right themselves. It's definitely more common in rapidly growing broiler chickens, and it can also lead to carcass downgrading and condemnation. So it is a meat quality defect as well as a welfare issue. The next slide. The conventional broiler chickens are also very inactive birds. They want to sit and eat, and that's all they want to do. So they spend a lot of time in contact with the litter, which makes them more prone to skin lesions like foot pad dermatitis, hock burns, and breast blisters. And we have some research showing that there are 15 to 25% more common, these skin lesions, in the fast growing birds compared to some of the slower growing alternatives. Next slide. They also tend to have worse immunity and disease resistance. Rapid growth leaves chickens more susceptible to bacterial diseases, such as those listed here. They have higher mortality and tend to have greater antibiotic use in conventional systems in order to prevent and treat disease. Next slide. Fast-growing broiler chickens have very exacting management requirements. So if you don't get these right, you often don't get the production results that you're expecting. These birds are very sensitive to temperature fluctuations and heat stress. They have very precise nutritional requirements. So we've heard stories about the diets of the chickens being slightly off and that just leading to a very high mortality. So they're not resilient to nutritional deficiencies. They have very little predator avoidance ability, so they're not fast. If you've got them out on pasture, they are just sitting chickens for predators who all want to eat them and they can't get away. They're just not bred for variable outdoor environments. They're very fragile. And when their requirements go unmet, their growth performance and feed efficiency are probably not what is promised in the brochure, and their welfare is definitely compromised. So we could have the next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Dalton so she can talk to you about what the alternative is to these fast-growing breeds.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Let me just make sure I can find the slides again. Oops. Well, it's great to be able to speak with you all today about slower growing chicken breeds, especially how they can benefit pasture-based systems like your own. So I first want to start with what we mean by slower growing. So these chickens gain weight more gradually than the typical Cornish cross, as Sarah mentioned. And those Cornish cross, we're talking about the cob or Ross birds. So whereas the Cornish cross will grow fast, about 65 to 80 grams per day on average, there's quite a range with slower growing breeds. You might have ones like the Labo Rouge crosses that may grow less than 30 grams per day on average, while you have more intermediate breeds like the Hubbard Redbro or Avian's Rustic Gold that grow around 55 grams per day on average. But slower growth isn't the only thing that matters here. When we're determining if a bird has higher welfare, what's most important is how well that bird lives and their quality of life. So that's where we start to talk about welfare outcomes. And these are welfare outcomes that we can directly observe or measure from the animal, like how well they walk, as Sara mentioned with gait score, you know, its overall behavioral expression, and whether that breed shows sign of pain or discomfort as it grows heavier throughout its life. So from the example here on the illustration on the left, and this is a lovely illustration from the ASPCA, you'll see a slower growing brown broiler breed on the bottom. That's the pioneer breed, and it's upright, standing upright with a proportionate body frame, and it's got strong legs, so it's probably able to remain mobile throughout its entire life. And then in contrast here, we have the Cornish Cross breed on the top. You know, it might be struggling to take more than a few steps as it grows heavier and might be spending most of its time sitting on the ground. And that can lead to dirty feathers and hawkburn lesions on their legs. So when choosing a higher welfare breed, we're not just looking at how fast or how slow they grow, we're looking at how well they live. So to raise healthy, higher welfare birds, we first need to think about two things. First off, inputs. So what we give the bird. So in terms of feed, housing, management, and their genetic makeup. And then outcomes, which I talked about. So how the bird responds to those inputs. So outcomes being its behavior, the bird's physical condition, and the mental well-being of the bird. So welfare outcomes, as I mentioned, are animal-based measures. This means we're looking at the bird itself and not just what's provided in its environment to assess its welfare. So as Sara mentioned, is it walking well? Does it look comfortable, or does it look stressed or in pain? So in terms of looking at its behavior and overall mental well-being, we can look at things like, is the bird dust bathing? That's a good sign in terms of its welfare. It means it's not in pain. It feels safe and relaxed, because birds are really only going to perform this behavior when its basic needs like feed and water access are met. But if the bird is sitting all day and avoiding any sort of movement, that could probably mean it's in pain and unable to be active. So it might be bored or frustrated as well as being in pain. So that diagram on the right is a really good way to show how all these good inputs like proper feed, housing, and good breed selection really lead to good welfare outcomes for the bird. So if we want chickens that can thrive outdoors and on pasture, we need to give them what they need, and we need to choose breeds that can make the most out of their pasture environment. So it's important to remember, and this is where we often get into a lot of disagreement with maybe the wider industry, that you can't just improve welfare by measuring outcomes. You also need to be willing to improve the inputs that affect those outcomes. So both of these graphs show how breed choice affects chicken welfare. So looking at the graph on the left and using that same gait scoring scale that Sara touched on earlier. So a chicken with a gait score of 0 can walk normally, whereas a bird scoring a 5 is incapable of any sort of sustained walking on their feet. So the three most common Cornish cross lines globally, and those are listed here as CC1 to CC3, had more birds with poorer walking ability than the slower growing breed in the study. And this was even when it was raised under the same conditions and in a good environment with excellent management, and to a relatively light final body weight as well. And the chart on the right shows how often different breeds use perches. This is from a different study, but a larger commercial study. So the slower growing breeds were much more active and used enrichments like straw bales for perching. The Cornish cross birds didn't perch at all. So what this really tells us is that genetics matters. You know, choosing birds with better leg health and mobility means that your birds will be more active, they will use their environment more, and they'll show more natural behavior, which are all signs of good welfare. So now talking about what traits specifically make a breed higher welfare when we're talking about commercial practice. So it's about selecting birds that are balanced, unlike the Cornish cross. So when we're selecting higher welfare breeds, we're selecting birds that are balanced for both performance and welfare traits. So they're not only chosen for growth or their feed conversion and meat yield, but also traits that support better health and behavior. So this is things like better leg health and mobility so they can stay active and walk throughout their lives. As Sara mentioned as well, stronger natural immunity because this helps reduce the incidence of disease and the need for antibiotics. Improved organ size and development. So that supports their overall health and resilience throughout their lives. Lower rates of meat quality issues, the breast muscle myopathies that Sara mentioned, like woody breast and white striping, that can lead to downgrades of the carcass at slaughter. These birds also show, you want to make sure they show more natural behavior, they're more active, they forage more, and they make more use of their environment, whether that be enrichments indoors or outdoor access. And compared to the Cornish Cross that are just bred for fast growth and meat yield, slower growing breeds offer a more holistic and sustainable option when you look at things overall. And this is especially true for pasture-based systems where you really want to make sure that the claims that you're using really live up to what you're advertising. So in practice, claims like the birds are thriving outdoors, they can be raised without the need of antibiotics, and that you're really producing a nutrient-dense, high-quality meat. And these can really matter for consumers of pasture-based meat. So if you're looking for commercial breeds that truly support higher welfare, it's helpful to know that there are formal breed assessments out there. And the RSPCA out of the UK and Global Animal Partnership based here in the US have probably the two most recognized broiler breed assessment protocols that are used today. And both of these protocols are designed so that the breed under evaluation can grow to its genetic potential. So they're not limited by diet or suboptimal conditions. They're given the best conditions and they're given a freely available, non-limiting diet. And these protocols assess whether the welfare outcomes of the test breed in comparison maybe to set thresholds in the science or available research, or also to another control breed that might be tested within the same trial. And the only time we see exemptions from formal testing in commercial practice is for very slower growing local breeds. And those usually grow on average less than 40 grams per day. And this is done just to prevent the need for expensive testing where these smaller local breeds might have a limited commercial application. Okay, so now just to talk about what this all means for pasture-based production. So looking a bit more closely at how slower growing breeds perform in outdoor systems. So slower growing breeds are especially well suited for pasture-based systems. As we've mentioned, they tend to be healthier overall, fewer leg issues, and lower mortality during grow out. These birds are more resilient. They're better able to handle heat stress, cold snaps, and muddy conditions. And that's in thanks part to their better feather and skin condition, as well as their stronger natural immune systems. So in fact, a Dutch government report that came out in 2022 found that farms using slower growing breeds used 9 times less antibiotics than those raising faster growing Cornish Cross birds. So that's a big win for both bird health and consumer trust. And then behaviorally, these birds are more active, they walk more, they perch and forage more, and they just make better use of outdoor space. So really thriving on pasture and not just surviving in these outdoor conditions. And then finally, and this is kind of a newer area of research we're seeing, getting more information on, is a meat quality standpoint. These slower growing breeds offer a lot of real advantages. As Sara mentioned, they'll have fewer breast meat defects, and that's important from a downgrade standard, but their meat also tends to be nutritionally a bit higher in terms of its quality, so higher in polyunsaturated fats, and that's the healthy fat. Also in antioxidants. And we've actually had a pilot study done in 2025 using mobile coops, and this was done in the southwestern US, found that meat from those pioneer broilers that I showed earlier had 17 times more antioxidants more protein, and less saturated fat than Cornish cross birds raised in the same pasture setup. So you're getting a healthier bird and a better product in the end by choosing to grow a slower growing, higher welfare breed. And now I just wanted to talk about two examples. There's a lot and a continually growing variety of higher welfare, slower growing breeds that are available commercially in the United States. And some are especially well suited for pasture-based systems. So the best example of this would be the Pioneer. It's here on your screen on the left. This breed was developed specifically for pasture and free range operations. It's a really hardy breed, it's very active, and it was bred to digest alternative feeds, which makes it also a very good fit for regenerative systems. It was originally bred and developed from Transylvania naked neck, Delaware, and Cornish cross chickens, and it's really known for its flavorful meat. So regarding performance, the Pioneer grows a little bit more slowly at first in the first couple of weeks, but then it will catch up and even surpass the Freedom Ranger by 8 weeks, usually reaching about 5 to 6 pounds by 9 weeks. And then another breed option in the higher welfare, slower growing breeds that's available commercially is the Hubbard Redbro that's here on the right. So this breed was originally developed in Europe for indoor only systems, but it's recently also been used in mobile coops in the United States. It grows a bit faster, so it reaches 5 pounds in about 6 weeks. And it has a body structure, as you can see on the image here on the bottom right, more similar to the Cornish cross. And because of that, it lacks some of the outdoor hardiness of the Pioneer, also that it was developed for indoor systems. But both of these breeds do really offer a step up in terms of welfare and meat quality in compared to these conventional Cornish cross broilers. But I wanted to present different options, which are available in the higher welfare, slower growing market here in the US. And, you know, depending on what your goals and your setup are, one might be better suited than another for you. All right. Now I want to pass it back to Sara, who's going to talk a little bit about the Better Chicken Commitment.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, so the Better Chicken Commitment is a set of standards for some of the largest chicken buyers in the world. And it was created by the scientists at animal welfare organizations who got together in about 2016, reviewed all the latest research, and came up with a list of what we thought the most prominent, the most important animal welfare issues were for companies that wanted to help us move the industry by changing their supply chain. So we can have the next slide. This is what is in the Better Chicken Commitment. So it puts a limit on stocking density. So it asks companies to ask their suppliers to limit stocking density to 6 pounds per square foot. In the US, we tend to use about 7.5 pounds per square foot. So this is quite an improvement over conventional production. It requires an improved environment. So that includes environmental enrichment if you're doing indoor production, such as hay bales and perches and ramps and platforms, and to provide a minimum darkness per night, because some producers only provide 2 to 4 hours of darkness per night to keep their chickens eating as much as possible. It also addresses slaughter. So that point number 3 is about using a controlled atmosphere system rather than electrical water bath stunning. That's a whole nother lecture, but slaughter is in there as one of the most important points in the Better Chicken Commitment. But the important thing for today is that point number 4, to use only BCC approved breeds. So that's Better Chicken Commitment approved breeds that demonstrate higher welfare outcomes and compliance with all standards via some type of third-party auditing system. So I think if you advance one more, yeah. In order to meet the requirements of the third-party audit in the Better Chicken Commitment, a good option is the Global Animal Partnership Program. So we can have the next slide. Global Animal Partnership, or GAP, is a 5-step animal welfare certification and standards program. So it starts with base certification, which is no cages, no crates, and no crowding. And then at step 2, producers have to add environmental enrichments to the indoor environment. You can earn level 3 if you provide outdoor access. And if you're mostly pasture-based, you can earn up to level 4. Animal-centered means that there are no painful routine practices done on the animals like beak trimming. And if you do all of that and you slaughter on the farm, it's possible to reach step 5 plus. And the reason it is a welfare benefit to slaughter on the farm is that the animals aren't exposed to the stress of transport. So the animal welfare certified label can be used on the package of products that meet the Global Animal Partnership standard. And it covers not only everything in the Better Chicken Commitment, but also nutrition, veterinary care, housing, euthanasia, and transport. And as Dr. Dalton mentioned, since 2016, it's been testing and trialing breeds and has a list of breeds that are approved for the program and is slowly phasing those in. Right now, if you are at step 4, 5, or 5 plus, you must use one of these approved slower growing breeds, and that will eventually be rolled out to the lower steps in the coming 5 years. So we could have the next slide. And these are the benefits of GAP certification, and we hope you'll be interested in this program. We think it's a really good program for demonstrating higher welfare outcomes and that you've met a set of animal welfare criteria. But even if you don't sign up to the GAP certification, it's good to go and just look at the standards online because they provide technical guidance and they can demonstrate, they could show to you what you would need to do on your farm in order to achieve a high welfare status. Another benefit of GAP certification is that some of you who are rearing poultry are probably already doing a lot of things right. You're probably already doing a high welfare system. And by having a label that says animal welfare certified on your package, you can show that to consumers. So you can add that animal welfare claim on a package. It's added value for anyone that you're selling to. And it's possible that it can also increase your market access, not only to local companies, but also to multinational companies. There are quite a few, such as food service industries, that like to partner with small scale farmers in order to provide local sourcing, high welfare sourcing, and meet their sustainability requirements. And being part of the GAP program also gives you access to the network of resources that we have, such as access to the contact information for all of the producers who do these slower growing birds. So with that, I'll take you to the next slide. And I just want to say thank you very much for your kind attention. I think that fact farmers have the opportunity to sort of lead the way on this issue, and we are happy to collaborate. And please take down our email addresses because we would love to hear from you. And with that, we'll take any of your questions.
Before we do questions, if you don't mind, we do actually have a poll we'd like to run, and you guys had a poll you wanted me to run that I didn't run at the beginning. So would you still like me to do that, or do you want me to skip it?
Sure, if it's still possible and it won't
It's possible. Everything is possible.
or we could do it after maybe.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to do our poll then.
Okay.
And this poll, it's really helpful for us when we're trying to go to funders to try and fund this program, because we do pay our presenters, and also the time that Catherine and I put into this. So this really does help with that. People really like to hear how much these webinars impact them, and it also lets us know how many animals are also impacted. So I'll let that sit up for a couple of seconds and we can go ahead and start. So Hillary and Sarah, you guys ready to go straight into questions, or do you need a glass of water or something to?
All good.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we don't have very many questions yet, but I assume people are going to start typing in. I did want to, even though I'm on the GAP board, I also we also FACT recommends animal welfare approved as well with a greener world, and they also have the same requirements as far as breeds go. But if you need to get a certification and you're not quite ready to do the slower growing breeds, or you're not entirely on pasture yet, then one of the GAP steps is a great place to start. if you wouldn't mind, put your questions in the Q&A rather than in the chat. So I'll start, Catherine. So that Hubbard breed, that's the Redbro, right?
Yeah, the Hubbard Redbro. Yeah.
The Redbro. Is that the one that's used in larger scale production?
So yeah, it has been used a lot in indoor systems, in all throughout Europe, really. It's really the fastest growing of the slower growing breeds. I should mention, it's a male 70 M77, like, so a Cornish cross male crossed with a slower growing Redbro female. So that's why they've really kind of pushed it into that intermediate level, but it has passed the formalized breed assessments, both GAPS and the RSPCA's. We're starting to see it be used more in commercial systems, indoor-only systems in the US. And they've done a lot of work, Hubbard, in the last couple of years to put down breeding stocks of these birds. So we're happy to also facilitate contact with the Hubbard breeders as well, if that's something that you all are interested in.
All right, Catherine, you ask the next question.
You mentioned a study about pioneers regarding nutrient density. Can you share the link with us? And then we'll put that in our email going out tomorrow as well.
Well, so the study's not formally out right now. That was a little bit of a teaser that I just wanted to offer today, but it should be coming out this fall, and I'll share it with you, Sam and Catherine, and then you can forward it along to the people that attended today.
Perfect. All right. Freedom Rangers and related breeds available from the Freedom Ranger hatcheries are probably the most common varieties of slower growing broilers in the US. They are not on the GAP breed list. Why not? And how do you think they compare? I've raised them and they seem to meet the criteria you describe. And I can answer that. They are.
Yeah.
Hillary was just talking about the ones that are the closest to the Cornish crosses, but they're all of those slow growing breeds are on the list. It's not just those two birds.
Yeah. And I think the Freedom Ranger isn't on necessarily the GAP list right now, but I believe it would potentially qualify. I think we'd have to look at it. It is a better chicken commitment approved breed because we've had smaller producers approach us. I believe with the Royal Grey broiler as well, they wanted to use that. These were an extensive kind of outdoor pasture-based systems, but they didn't want to pay for formalized testing. So we provided that exemption, but yeah, that's something to flag to GAP as well. The Freedom Ranger isn't on their approved list.
They're not on. So thank you so much. Whoever asked that. It was Rebecca. Thank you back, Rebecca. I thought they were. Shows you how much I know.
We had another question about the Freedom Ranger in the same line of, it seems like the Freedom Ranger isn't being pushed through this presentation. Are there specific downfalls to this breed, or is the Pioneer just a better choice? We're 100% pasture, free range, no nets, no tractors.
I wouldn't say that one's better than another. I think there's just been a push more for the Pioneer to be used in larger scale operations. So the Freedom Ranger has obviously been around for a long time. It's a great bird. You know, it's used by a lot of smaller producers that do pasture-based outdoor free range setups, but it hasn't been implemented by kind of the bigger players in the broiler industry. Whereas the Pioneer, there's been more push for it to be maybe an heirloom offering in national retailers or these bigger companies.
So I raised both this year, and I'd never raised the Pioneer before because it's got a naked neck and it's sort of ugly. And so I'm shallow that way. And I like my chickens to look pretty out on pasture. But I've raised the Freedom Rangers for years and years and years and years. And I love the Freedom Ranger. And I thought nothing would ever stop me from raising a Freedom Ranger. But this year we had a lot of problems with the Freedom Rangers and their delivery. And we had a lot show up dead. So one time, it was earlier in the season, we had 150 show up dead. So we had to replace those birds. And so we replaced them with the Pioneers. They grow out a little bit faster. So they were ready at 9 weeks versus 12 weeks, which was super nice. And then they were basically, we did taste testing afterwards and nobody could tell the difference between the Pioneer and the Freedom Ranger. Weirdly, we also ended up with 11 Cornish Crosses, which not on purpose. They just, I don't know what Freedom Ranger hatchery was doing that day, but somebody gave us 11 Cornish Crosses and we taste tested against the Cornish Cross and the difference was huge. It was no comparison. And the Cornish Crosses, of all the feeds, we only had to discard the feeds. So when we processed all those birds together, the only feed we had to discard were the Cornish Crosses because they all had burns on them, whereas none of the other birds did. So all the other feed we could keep. So I love the Pioneer, but I also love the Freedom Ranger. But the Pioneer was easier to pluck. So that for me, and that's my station on slaughter day. So I'm the one that's making the decision to switch to the Pioneers solely because of plucking.
I think it's also, as you said, like it does grow a little bit faster. Like it might be slower at the start. It really kind of spends, I think, time developing a good frame, a healthier bird that can then put on weight a little bit more rapidly. Like, so when I've seen it, I've been very pleasantly surprised by how good the welfare of the bird is, and also pleasantly surprised by the fact that it does grow relatively fast too for a bird that does so well outdoors.
Yeah, and they were running around just like the Freedom Rangers. I mean, exactly what I would expect with a Freedom Ranger. I got out of the Pioneer and they were ready to go sooner and they were easier to pluck. All right, so Darlene asks, by switching to slower growing breeds, how is profit impacted?
I can start on that, Hillary, and then maybe you want to jump in.
Good.
When you give the animals more space and a longer grow out time, it definitely impacts the cost, the production cost for sure. So we have seen sort of estimates that vary from 20 to 40% more. It just depends, but that includes giving them more space as well. But I think the question that we really have to ask is, why is conventional chicken so cheap? It has become so cheap because we have pushed these animals so far to gain weight so fast that we've really created this terrible welfare problem. And I think what we have to do is start, helping consumers understand that it's worth it and it matters to pay a little bit more for an animal that has experienced a good life, that has been, reared on pasture, that is slower growing, that doesn't experience pain and suffering before it becomes, dinner. So I think that we really have to switch that narrative. Chicken is so popular because it is so cheap and it has just grown so much. And I think the thing that we're really struggling with the most is to help consumers understand, what slower growing means and why it's so important for everyone.
Yeah. I would just also add to that, Sarah, and you did a great job just kind of explaining that the overall picture of the chicken industry right now is maybe not in the right direction. But I think if you look overall at the sustainability of, and more holistically, with a slower growing breed, you kind of end up with less waste. So you're not having as many birds die before slaughter. You're not having downgrades in the meat quality as well. They're not necessarily eating as much feed, but you're also not at the like broiler breeder level as well. Those birds don't need to be feed restricted because you're not looking for that trade-off where you're trying to kind of suppress their growth so they'll be reproductively fit. They have better egg quality as well. They're more productive in that sense. So looking at it overall, there is like a little bit probably of an environmental, maybe increased feed still a little bit because they're growing them a little bit longer, but it's not as extensive as like the overall broiler industry has framed it. I think there's also ways to mitigate it as well by looking at potentially like alternative feed sources as well, because these slower growing breeds just aren't pushed so heavily for production that they're not just eating and pooping out a lot of these nutrients. They can handle a lot more nutrient dense diet as well.
I think the more we look, the more we find the benefits to these slower growing breeds for sure.
Absolutely.
Are there any studies to catalog regionally preserved slow-growing breeds?
I know there's been some great work in Europe on preserving like their the breeds that are used for like the EU organic market in like the heritage lines there, but I don't know about if that's happened in the United States or North America for, you know, a meat bird?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know
Yeah.
that the loss of genetic diversity in the poultry industry is a huge concern, and that it would,
Mhm.
we need a greater genetic base, especially with diseases like avian influenza. I mean, maybe there's some birds who are more naturally resistant to diseases like that, and it would be really sad if we lost all of those genetics just because we're using, two types of chickens all over the world. So it's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, but I think it's a really important issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Anna says she just started raising the American Breese. I guess it's Breese, right? Would be Breese. Are they on the list, or do you know of anyone producing them? I don't know what they are. I'm curious now. I'm going to look them up.
You know, please send these breeds our way if you're interested in becoming either GAP or BCC kind of verified supplier. You know, send these breeds our way. Some of these, you know, more backyard or smaller kind of scale production broiler breeds just don't become like aren't pushed as a big focus to us, but just we're happy to look into them and have them added to the list as well. Especially, I imagine it's not growing anywhere close to needing formal breed assessment.
Yeah, I can just add that Global Animal Partnership, in order to test a new breed, it costs upwards of $100,000. So usually the breeds that aren't large in numbers won't go through the formal testing process, but if they grow below 40 grams a day or less, they're automatically exempted into the program. We just need to see the performance data in order to make that decision. But if it's a slow growing bird, it could probably be used in the GAP program.
Mhm.
We had a question. I think that this was referring to when you were talking about the Pioneer breed versus Freedom Ranger, that is the health benefits of the meat quantifiable, I guess, in addition to like what separates it from the Cornish Cross.
I don't know if I don't think there's any studies that have been done between the Freedom Ranger and the Pioneer. I know about the newer research that's been done in terms of the nutrient quality between, I believe it's going to be the Redbro, the Hubbard Redbro, the Pioneer that I mentioned, and one of the Cornish Crosses, which I believe was a Ross line. And that research, you know, I've just got to see kind of pilot research that has come out of that, which is really exciting. And it's also based here in the US, which is great, out of these pasture systems. But that should be hopefully coming out in the fall. There's more research being done in terms of nutrient density and meat quality of the higher welfare breeds out on pasture. So that kind of genetics and environment interaction. I think there was a new paper Sara and I were talking about out of Poland, but this is becoming more of an explored issue in like the scientific community as well.
And
All right.
then the last, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
So Vanessa would like to know where you can purchase Pioneer chicks, and I can answer that. It's
You go ahead, yeah.
Metza and Meyer both have them, and I think the Freedom Ranger hatchery is starting to do the White Rangers, which people have talked about, said good things about them as well.
Honestly, any breed that isn't a Ross or a Cobb chicken is probably a step in the right direction.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think if you're using any of these other breeds, but the check into your Cornish crosses, because they are just Ross and Cobb birds.
Mhm.
So I think any of these alternative, slightly slower growing breeds would probably be a better option. So if you're already growing them, that's great. And if you can send us performance data, we would love to know how your birds are doing.
Absolutely. And yeah, just as Sam did, you know, sometimes it's just about trialing a couple birds on the ground and seeing how they do in your system and comparing that.
Yeah, I was really rude about the Pioneer ahead of time. Really a friend asked me if I'd be willing to try them. I'm like, they're ugly. I'm not going to try them. And now here I am. I'm like, I love them. They're fantastic. And I put up Hillary and Sarah's poll. So if you guys, whoever's left, if you wouldn't mind answering that, that'd be great. So Blake says that they have a couple of other hatchery options for the Pioneer depending on the region. So Blake, if you can email me those, I'll send them out in the follow-up email. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind answering these few questions, that'd be great. Thank you, Blake. But yeah, this was amazing. I really wish before I joined the GAP board, I had seen this presentation because it would have cleared up so many confusing things. I did not know that the Cornish crosses were these Ross birds, and I had no idea about any of these. It's just not the world I've ever lived in. I go to Metzer, I go to Myers, or I go to Freedom Ranger or Valley of the Moon for turkeys. It's just like I don't really think of going to the hatcheries. So anyway, all right, I'm gonna end the poll. We've got one, or I'll end the poll in a second. I'm gonna share my screen if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing your screen. And I am gonna share my screen. So we've got an absolutely fantastic season for you for this year. We're still scheduling them, but just want to let you know a recording of this webinar and it will be available within the next few days, probably tomorrow. These documents we archived on our website, and I will send you an email with the hatcheries that Blake gives to me. The hatcheries that Blake will be giving to me, and I took some screenshots during this presentation as well that I can share with you. So we have some great webinars coming up, like I said, this autumn, and our next one is September 16th, and it's humane handling for sheep and goats, and I think that will be a great one. That's been asked. People have asked for that for quite a while now, and I finally was able to find somebody who could do it. So I'll send a link to all of the webinars we've got coming up so you can go ahead and register for them. And just a huge thank you to Hillary and Sara. It's been such a pleasure. It's so much wonderful information, and it's just fantastic to get the history of the chicken industry. It's just been absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to everybody soon. See you later. See you next week. Hopefully see you next week. Bye-bye.